Before I saw this movie, I did like 2 trailer reactions to Thor Love and Thunder. And in those videos, I made a few predictions about the movie, as you do in trailer reactions before the movie. And I think I was spot on with a few of those predictions. So throughout this video, I'll be dropping some of those clips from the past and expanding on them to kind of support my points about this film. Here's my main point, or my main prediction that I made about Thor Love and Thunder that I was kind of afraid of, and this movie did it. So here you go.
I feel like with Guardians 2, James Gunn himself, he's a very funny writer, writes a lot of funny stuff. He was like, sequel, gotta go bigger, so he put a lot of jokes into the sequel. And now that this is Taika Waititi's sequel to Thor Ragnarok, and Thor Ragnarok was so funny, I'm kind of worried that this movie might run into the same problem that, the second Guardians movie did, that it might just have too many jokes.
Yeah, and with that being said, today's review is for Thor Love and Thunder. This is going to be a spoiler review. Once again, a spoiler review. If you haven't seen the movie yet, leave this video a like, go watch the movie, come back, and let's discuss this movie together. And also, I'm not going to be talking about everything that happened in the movie, just because I could forget about some things, but I will try to cover as much as I can, because I do kind of have a lot of thoughts about this film. Thor is the first character to get 4 movies, not only 3 movies, or the first main Avenger to get that. And this movie is once again written and directed by Taika Waititi, who did Thor Ragnarok, which is a movie I absolutely love. I want to start off this review by saying Thor Ragnarok, I absolutely love it. It breathed fresh new life into the character of Thor. Like, the first 2 Thor movies are some of my least favorite MCU movies just in general. I've grown to kind of appreciate Thor 1 a little bit, but still not my favorites. And Thor was my least favorite Avenger until Thor Ragnarok, and I absolutely love Thor Ragnarok. That movie, I remember when I first saw it, I was dying in the movie theater of laughter. Like, so funny, so creative. Like, Taika did his thing with that one. And in this movie, Thor Love and Thunder, they try to capture the same magic, but it doesn't work. You know what? Let's start off with the positives first. First of all, the positive is Christian Bale's gore, actually. I was excited to see Christian Bale in this role because Christian Bale is joining the MCU as the villain, and Taika was kind of hyping his villain up. And he's actually great when he is in the movie. He's not in the movie a lot. That's the problem. This movie is also very short, so gore is not in the... Gore takes like a back seat, like somewhere in the middle of the movie. But when gore is on screen, Christian Bale, he's great. Great villain, super creepy, scary. What I would have loved to see is him actually kill some gods. We saw him kill one god in the beginning of the movie, but then everything else he just kind of did off screen, and they were just kind of talking about it like, oh my god, he killed all these gods, we gotta stop them. Okay, like, can we see him kill some of those gods? Lady Sif came back also, because we forgot about her in Thor Ragnarok. I guess, where was she this entire time? We'll never know where she was. She came back, lost her arm, didn't even go into battle, and then she became a teacher at the end. But anyways, gore was great, and I loved pretty much everything they did with him. His planet, or his little scary dimension where like everything turns black and white, all the color gets lost. That was fucking sick. I love that. Just wish he was in the movie more. Another thing that I like is Jane Foster. They brought Natalie Portman back as Jane Foster, and in this movie she is Mighty Thor. So she gets the powers of Thor, and I've heard about this from the comics. Again, don't read comics, but I've heard about this in the past, that when that storyline takes place in the comics, Jane Foster gets cancer, and then she gets, Thor's powers. And I was really wondering whether they were going to do that, and then they did in the movie, and I actually really liked that idea. Because it was something like, okay, so cancer, really bad. Fuck cancer. Cancer is awful. But in the scope of this movie, I think it really worked for this character and the story and the way they did it. Because it served that purpose for me of like, she's looking for a higher power, God's power. And she gets it. She gets the hammer. But, like, cancer is still killing her. And she ultimately dies from it. And cancer is something that unfortunately a lot of people suffer through. So it was like a human problem that grounded everything. In the scope of everything being magic, Thor has a flying hammer, flying axe. Everybody has these superpowers. Thor is mighty. Thor gets punched, thrown, kicked. He's still fine because, he's a superhero. And even that happens to Jane. But the cancer, what unfortunately, like I said, a lot of people have, it kind of humanized everything. Jane also has some sick Thor hammer action. She gets Mjolnir, and the Mjolnir is broken because from Thor Ragnarok, it has cracks and everything into it. And when she throws it, she can throw it and it spreads into pieces and then comes right back together. And like the way she used all of that, that was sick. On the note of that, the Thor action, this movie is some of my favorite Thor action just in general in the MCU. I loved the action sequences in here when they do happen. They don't happen often, but they're really fun when they do happen. The way he was using Stormbreaker, at a certain point he uses Mjolnir and Stormbreaker at the same time. There was some team-ups between him and Jane and some combos there. And Valkyrie also, Valkyrie gets Zeus's lightning at some point and she throws down as well. That action sequence on Gore's planet, I keep mentioning again, in black and white, really great like action between Gore versus Valkyrie versus Thor versus Mighty Thor. It all worked really well. Some of my favorite Thor action we have seen in the MCU. And going back to Jane, I mean, what this movie did so well is Jane was really not that much of an interesting character in the first two Thor movies. That's why they broke them up and kind of got rid of her. But she came back here, and this movie made me care about her and care about the whole Jane and Thor relationship like no other movie did. So there's that. You know, just now, like the entire movie, I was thinking that same point that I made about Jane having cancer and, you know, the whole idea of, you know, higher power and her having cancer and stuff like that. And I thought it was a great choice, but there's a post-credit scene where she goes to Valhalla, which is like God, heaven. Also, Idris Elba shows back. Idris Elba is back as Heimdall in heaven. And it makes me think that, like, they're going to find some kind of way to bring Jane back, aren't they? And if they do, kind of just, in my opinion, defeats the whole purpose, the whole idea that I just said of, you know, cancer being this thing that humanizes everything in this movie. And unfortunately, she loses her battle, like she dies in battle, which is, you know, which is another theme, right? You have to die in battle to go to Valhalla. And she dies battling cancer. But, like, you know, in the future, if they bring her back from it, it's like, okay, kind of just undid everything from Thor Love and Thunder. Also, can I just ask, when the fuck did Heimdall get a son? When did he have a son? Did I miss something? Okay, so, as far as positives go, Gore, Christian Bale, Jane Foster, and the Thor action in this movie. Good shit. Now let's go to negatives, and there's a lot of them. This movie is, if I have to summarize it, this movie is just okay. It really is. This movie tries way too hard to be funny. The first two acts, I would say, at least the first act and half of the second act, are messy as hell, and they're kind of bad. First of all, minor point, in the first act, the CGI, not good at all. Green screen, bad, very noticeable. What the hell happened there? Come on, guys. Did all of your budget go towards the third act? Because the CGI, like, as the movie got better, like I kept on saying, to the third act. So the CGI kept on getting better. The CGI started in a very poor place in the beginning, in my opinion. The Guardians were there. And here's a point that I made about the Guardians back in my trailer reactions.
And the Guardians show up. I wonder for how much of the movie the Guardians are going to be in it. I'm expecting them to be there in, like, the first act, and then they'll probably just leave him somewhere to go on his own adventure. I don't expect the Guardians to be in this movie forever, so.
As you can see, I thought back then, like, they weren't going to be in the movie much. They were just going to drop him off on his mission and leave. And that actually turned out to be the case. But it still felt super unnatural, and it makes me question of, why did we ever set Thor up in Endgame to go with the Guardians? Why did we ever give fans that hope of, like, hey, Thor might show up in the Guardians movie, or the Guardians are going to be in Thor's movie? Because they were just there for like a really, really quick second. I'm starting to think that Taika and somebody else, maybe Kevin Feige it is, have kind of a disconnect of what they want to do with Thor. Because in Thor Ragnarok, Taika came in and he was like, all right, I'm going to take out his eye and I'm going to make him not have a weapon. Make him learn the lesson that he doesn't need a weapon. And then Infinity War happened, and then they were like, all right, he needs a weapon. He quite literally says he needs a hammer. And also, let's give him an eye. So just undid some of that from Thor Ragnarok. And then in Endgame, they were like, you're going with the Guardians. And then Taika was like, never mind, we're done with that. No more Guardians. Why do we keep doing that to Thor? Why do we keep giving him or taking things away and then just undoing that immediately in the next movie that he's in? Like I said, although I predicted that the Guardians were going to be in the movie much, it still felt extremely underwhelming. There's a point in this movie right in the beginning where Star-Lord out of nowhere, just out of nowhere, in my opinion at least, goes, buddy, you need to find out who you're gonna be. Like something like that, he says him that he's got to go on this journey of self-discovery, basically. And that line, or that entire speech, felt so out of place, extremely unnatural, because we didn't get like a build-up of it at all. Yeah, the movie started with Korg's narration. The movie's also really short, so we just gotta go through things, and we got a quick little montage of Thor with the Guardians. And then, yeah, Star-Lord goes, hey buddy, you don't fit in here, you gotta go find your own place. I remember watching that in the movie theater, and as soon as Star-Lord started giving his speech, it just, to me personally, felt extremely out of place. It didn't feel natural. When I say the movie cuts corners, again, like this movie is really short, where it took a major cut was when Jane gets called by Mjolnir, and Jane goes to New Asgard, and she's standing there over the hammer, and the hammer's like about to assemble itself, and then the movie cuts, and we'll go to a different scene. And then when Thor enters New Asgard to like save everybody, Jane is already Thor. We skipped the entire part of her getting the hammer, maybe her having like a weird reaction to it, like, whoa, what? Like, it put itself together and like, I'm worthy, like, how is this happening? No, she was already Thor and going at it and having powers and everything. And apparently she was Thor for maybe a few days or hours, because Valkyrie knew about it. Valkyrie says to Thor, she's like, oh, you're gonna love this one. This is a thing that in the history of the MCU has always had an inconsistency with, is power levels. The MCU tends to give its characters powers whenever the fuck it feels like it, or take away some powers, to create unnecessary drama sometimes. But, like, in this movie, Thor, I guess, casts a spell in a little dating montage and be like, always protect Jane. And then the hammer realizes that she has cancer, so it comes back together and keeps her alive, but it doesn't keep her alive because it's actually killing her faster, so... Huh? But also it makes me think that, like, okay, so the hammer senses that this woman has cancer, and then it puts itself together. But what about when Thor was fighting Thanos and needed the hammer? Did the hammer just not feel like putting itself back together and helping Thor and going into battle? Did it not feel like helping its original owner? Also, one of the powers, like, I thought it was cool when it happened, but still doesn't really make sense. Thor can give his powers to kids? Because that would have been really helpful if he could give powers to other Avengers during battle, because other Avengers would be so much more useful. Imagine Black Widow or Hawkeye getting like Thor powers in the middle of battle. They would win battles so much quicker if that was the case. Maybe it was Zeus's lightning that can do that, but like the movie never clears that up. He just gives all the kids powers. It led to a really cool scene, I would say, but it still made me question of like how the little kid using the teddy bear to shoot lightning out. That was pretty good. That was good stuff. And I gotta say, the biggest problem for this entire movie, but especially the first two acts, is that this movie is trying way too hard to be funny. It's trying way too hard to be Thor Ragnarok. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I love that movie, the second one. I love that movie. But the one flaw that I would give it is sometimes it tries to be too hard to be funny and too many jokes. However, that movie is still really good. This movie tries way too hard to be funny, and at the end, it doesn't land as well as Guardians 2 did. Because Guardians 2, remember, it did a whole build-up with Yondu and his character and his relationship with Peter. And then there was that really emotional moment of Yondu dying at the end. But the movie, throughout it was really funny still, but great character moments. So James Gunn actually did his sequel much better than Taika Waititi did his Thor sequel, where he infused that comedy that both of them like to do in these movies. But James still hit those emotional beats really well, as Taika, he didn't. They redid a bunch of bits from Thor Ragnarok. The one that I had a good chuckle at was Matt Damon, and I believe it's Thor's brother, not Liam, the other one, I think his name is Luke. He was the one, they played Loki and Thor, so they redid that bit, but Melissa McCarthy was also in here, so that made me laugh. But then they come back again, like in the second act, Matt Damon and stuff, and it didn't hit that time. I was like, okay, now you're doing too much. Don't get me wrong, there was some bits that I laughed at, had a good time with, but there was also a lot that I didn't laugh at, like a lot, I mean. And my theater, as far as I remember, Thor Ragnarok, I was dying laughing. The theater was dying laughing. My theater, some people were laughing. For majority, though, kind of quiet. I'm gonna be honest with you, this is gonna sound super stupid, but at a certain point in this movie, jokes started to feel like jump scares because there would be like an emotional, deep moment, and I would be sitting there afraid that they're about to ruin it with a bad joke. There's a scene towards the end where Thor is sitting beside Jane at her bed, and they're talking about, her having cancer and all of that. And I was thinking, man, I was like, please don't say something stupid. You're going to say something stupid. Just don't say anything stupid right now to ruin this moment. And thankfully they didn't. This is what Taika does. He infuses comedy into his work in a very smart way. Not in this movie, but I've seen in other works him do it very well. And I do like a bunch of his other work. It became very obvious that he just couldn't help it a lot of the time, right? He was like, we gotta put a joke in here. He just got lost in his own sauce. What can I say? Going back to what I said about them redoing a bunch of bits from Thor Ragnarok, one of my other predictions was that Zeus was going to be just like the Grand Master, Jeff Goldblum's character from Thor Ragnarok. I said they were going to be like pretty much the same character. And they were. Like, the personality-wise, they were. If I was a betting man, I could have won so much money, because as soon as they were like, we gotta go see Zeus, and they enter his party, I'm like, this man is going to talk about orgies. I deadass in my head was like, he's going to say something about orgies, because he will, because they did that with the Grandmaster. And guess what he did? He talked about them twice, or maybe 3 times. I don't know how many times he said the word orgy, but he talked about them. If I put money on that, I would have fucking hit hard. It was just so obvious that Zeus was going to be this leader that's a joke, just like the Grand Master was. So obvious. And the post-credit scene, first of all, big Ted Lasso fan over here, so seeing Roy Kent here as Hercules, that was pretty dope. Interested in that. But Zeus in the post-credit scene goes, first of all, I don't know how he didn't die. Nobody dies. It's the MCU. Whatever. Why am I asking this? I know he's a god. He's Zeus. Whatever. But he goes, when did us gods become a joke? Motherfucker, in this movie, did you hear yourself? I feel like we've been in this review for a while now, and I still haven't talked about Thor, so let's just quickly talk about Thor. I mean, Chris Hemsworth Thor is Chris Hemsworth as Thor. He gets shirtless in this movie, he flexes his muscles, he acts dumb sometimes, he says some silly jokes. Again, most don't land, some do land. But some of my favorite moments were definitely like the emotional, serious moments with Jane, because it solidified that relationship more, but it also showed Chris Hemsworth's range as Thor. To me personally, I look at this movie, and I look at Thor Ragnarok, and I look at some of his other appearances as Thor, and I think to myself, the best Thor was Infinity War Thor, because he still had that dumb humor about him, but he was also serious when he needed to be. He was on mission. But again, he had some of his dumb lines, Good balance. Infinity War Thor is superior Thor. This is where the third act falls flat for me, is right at the end when they're at Eternity, I guess, and Gore can make a wish. First of all, I thought that Thor was going to make a wish. I thought it was going to be like a cheap way to get out of Jane's cancer thing, like Thor was going to make a wish that she didn't have cancer, but thankfully they didn't go in that direction. And Gore made the wish to bring back his daughter instead of, killing all the gods. The daughter that we saw in the beginning die. That beginning was also really good. I like the different tone of like the god being silly because he doesn't care about anything, but Gore standing there, Gore who like suffered through a bunch of things. I would have loved to learn more about Gore. Like, where does he come from? What time period did he come from? What planet did he come from? Is he human? Was he human? I guess he was human, but does he come from like a different time? Like, how does it all work? I know he was a guy that worshipped this god and didn't get the reward at the end, lost everything. But I would love to learn a little bit more about his history. Gore makes a wish, brings his daughter back, and then the daughter falls onto Thor. And Thor now lost Jane, but he becomes a father. He has to now take care of this child, which is a trope that we have seen many times before. The reluctant hero who has a child with him, but, he doesn't want to take care of the child. But by the end, he learns to take care of the child. I've seen this done much better than this movie did it. First of all, this child was dead the entire movie. When it died in the beginning, I thought, okay, we're done with the child. Then it came back at the end, and, Thor had to take care of it. I guess this was the lesson that this movie was trying to do. Like, Thor didn't know what to love or who to love, and then at the end he learns to love this child, so he now has a child to take care of. Like, he's he's ready to be a parent. I think the one way you can do it where it does work is, first of all, this child is alive and goes on this entire adventure with Thor throughout the movie, and Thor's like, no, I don't want to take care of you. But then by the end, he learns to love this child, and then he becomes this child's parent. But no, again, the child was dead throughout the movie, not there, and then at the end she just comes back to life and we're good to go. They even said the title of the movie, they were like, they're now love and thunder, and then the movie ends. But the movie ended in a really underwhelming way because I personally didn't care about this relationship. I was like, okay, so you're now going to be the dad of this random girl? Because this girl is kind of random to him. It's nobody. He's not friends with Gore. He never knew Gore like that. And now he has to take care of Gore's child, because fuck it, why not? I also think that child was played by Chris Hemsworth's daughter. I know his kids are in the movie a few times. I think Taika said his kids are also in the movie a few times. And Christian Bale's kid is in the movie a few times. And maybe Natalie Portman. Whatever. All the kids of all the actors are in this movie make an appearance. So I know that's probably a proud moment for him, but story-wise, it didn't make sense or land the way they thought it would. One final thing that I want to talk about is Valkyrie, Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie. Tessa Thompson was, first of all, good in this movie with what she was given. The problem is not Tessa Thompson, but the problem is what the script gives her to do. If you remember in Thor Ragnarok, when we meet her, she's this drunk and she's an ex-Valkyrie, but she's scared to fight Hela and she doesn't want to go into battle. But she has this great character development throughout the movie where, like, by the end, she's like, you know what? I have to do this. And she goes and fights Hela. She gets through her fear of Hela. And it's a great little character arc she has in that movie. In this movie, she has no arc whatsoever. At least to me, she didn't. It was a flat line in terms of character development. The movie starts, they're like, hey, Valkyrie's king, because that's where she left off in Endgame. And then at a certain point, she's like, you know what? I'm tired of just sitting around. Let's go fight. And she goes and fights. And she's just there as the third wheel to Jane and Thor the entire time. She says like one or two things, potentially about like having a girlfriend or something. But that's about it. Then she gets hurt and she sits out for the rest of the movie. So she's very underutilized in this movie, or she has no development whatsoever. Listen, I would say in general, Thor Love and Thunder is a mess. The third act is definitely my favorite part of the film. I think the movie gets better as it's going, but those first two acts are really messy, all over the place. The movie tries really hard to be funny. A lot of stuff doesn't land. Some stuff does land, like I chuckled a few times, I laughed, but more times than not, I went, and this is stupid. Yeah, I would say Taika Waititi and the team try to capture that same magic that Thor Ragnarok had, but it didn't. And I guess Thor now has a kid, so I'd say the movie's okay, just okay. Thor is alive, so maybe a Thor 5 in the future, and if Thor 5 comes around, we gotta do something new now, because maybe don't change completely, but let's cut down on the humor a little bit and do something that's not so messy as this movie. So yeah, that was my spoiler review to Thor Love and Thunder. Let me know down in the comments, what did you think about Thor Love and Thunder? I would love to have a discussion with you about that. Did you love it? Did you just like it? Did you think it was just okay? Or did you hate the movie in general? I've seen a wide range of opinions on like Twitter and all over the place about this movie. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. And check out some of my other videos. This week we have Miss Marvel ending. And you guys have been killing it with the support on the Miss Marvel reactions. I've been doing that with my good friend Alex, and we've been just having a blast with that. So if you could check that out, go ahead. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.